Hi, my name is Camilla and I am a chartered surveyor by profession. This year I was fortunate enough to be nominated to attend the World Built Environmental Forum by the RICS held in London. It was a real privilege to attend, and the point of this conference, this is now the third year it's been running, is essentially to really understand what are the trends that are shaping our urban environment, because as surveyors we are dealing with them in different ways on a daily basis. And secondly, to gain insights into real estate markets, from location strategy to building specification, and the wider questions of how to deal with some of the bigger challenges that are presenting in our profession, such as climate change, urbanization, and globalization. So I thought I'd share with you, as I've just returned from the first day, my notes and views following the various talks that were held. The day began with a nice talk by the co-founder of Tesla, J.B. Straubel, and this was a really interesting talk because I was wondering when I read the agenda, why was the co-founder of Tesla coming to talk at a property conference? But actually it was really interesting because what I got away from this talk is that Tesla is not any old motor vehicle company. They weren't sitting there saying, we are passionate about cars, we love cars, and this is what we want to do, as opposed to if BMW was up there or someone else. And that was kind of what I was expecting. How it came across was that the company is passionate about the environment. Actually, the environment is something they're passionate about because it dictates everything they do. So when they opened a recent factory, the co-founders were very strict. They said, we're going to have this factory, but it's going to be run on purely renewable energy. And they had to find a way to deal with that. And it's the same with their cars. So essentially, I feel like they're passionate about the environment and they see cars as a mere tool of building a better relationship with the environment, between humans and the environment, and improving sustainability. What was also really interesting is they were talking about moving on to visions of, energy efficient homes which don't rely on any forms of non-renewable energy, and what would that future look like, and how Tesla is investing in research to try and promote that. So you can see they're going from cars to residential, and they're always interacting with the built environment. They're now building service stations for their electrical vehicles, but they're very different to normal service stations in that they've got huge solar panels to fuel the entire building, where you can go have a coffee, sit and wait while your electric car is charging. And actually you only need 30 to 40 minutes charge, because they invented the supercharge to allow the car to drive for another few hours. So I thought it was really interesting to think about some of the things that they're doing. This was followed by the second talk, which was looking at the digitalization of real estate and digital innovation. This was a panel discussion, and I thought this panel discussion didn't really present solutions to what is happening with digitalization, the challenges and how we can overcome. It was more looking at some of the issues that we have. So you have artificial intelligence coming in. How is this affecting labor? How can we get labor to become more skilled so that we're not just losing jobs and we're not causing social disintegration in society? So I thought that was quite interesting. And another key finding from this talk was relating to the planning system, because one of the ideas floated around was that single-use properties are more and more becoming redundant. I think they're already pretty much redundant, is my personal opinion. If you have a building which is purely an office, it doesn't really work like that anymore, because there is an expectation. Employers want the best talent, so that office has got to have some kind of amenities value in it. They've got to have some kind of gym. They've got to have a restaurant use. I was fortunate enough to tour the UBS brand new offices in Broadgate a year or so ago. And it's incredible. They've got a Japanese garden, they've got a meditation studio. Not only do they have a gym, they have a separate spin studio. They've got everything inside that complex in order to ensure that they know that their staff, the bankers that are working at UBS, will be working 14, 15-hour days. That's a requirement of a job. So how can they attract and differentiate themselves? Well, they've invested a lot of money in this building, and they're providing a lot of amenities. And this is similar for the new Bloomberg building, which is said to be one of the more greener buildings that has come to the City of London. So I thought this talk was quite interesting in looking at the flexibility and adaptability of real estate as we go forward. The third talk I attended was to do with clusters. So essentially looking at clusters of business, work environment, even clusters of residential area. Basically saying an area where you get a cluster, you get a bunch of people, I'm trying not to use the word cluster, together, and you get agglomerations. All agglomeration means is these kind of, to put it in economics terms, positive externalities that benefit the people, the businesses that are in those clusters. So they were looking at productivity versus innovation. What is it that clusters actually produce? Because if you measure by pure GDP or productivity different ways, not all clusters really increase productivity. What they actually produce is innovation, because they get people talking, they provide the right environment for people to experiment, for people to understand. And then you get onto the question, well, how do you measure innovation? Because measuring patents is not simply enough, because many of the times people who actually get ideas often don't patent it, and then you get other people on the idea, and it might be that third person that comes along and acts upon this idea, and you give them credit because they've been able to do something with that initial idea. It's a bit like philosophers. Aristotle might have said something, but a few philosophers, a few generations later, somebody's used that and applied it to a theory, and suddenly that is more valuable. The session also looked at the fact that clusters, they are an organic concept, so they form naturally. If you look at Heathrow in London, that is a business culture, and it's come organically. There hasn't been this kind of, we're going to put up skyscrapers, plan the area, a bit like Canary Wharf is quite planned. It was set to be a cluster of financial and other professional services. That wasn't there in Heathrow, but the cluster has formed. You're seeing more and more businesses, telecommunication businesses are going there, and they're talking to one another, and you're creating another kind of Silicon Valley, because that's the most famous cluster. So if they are organic, can you manufacture them by simply putting up a few buildings? No, that's not going to do it. You might put the businesses there, put up the buildings, but that's not enough. There's got to be some leveraging, there's got to be some kind of open spaces, there's got to be things to encourage that agglomerations to actually occur. Merely putting up bricks and mortar is not going to help. So that was a really interesting breakout discussion on clusters. The fourth session I attended was on disruptive change. So this was looking at that we have technology. This is a disruptor. And we know this. So a really cool fact, or something that interested me from the talk, is they said by 2014, if we look at the Fortune 500 companies that were active in 2000, so 14 years later, 52% of the companies had either been liquidated or acquired by other companies. So in 14 years, which is actually a drop in the ocean, over half the companies that were Fortune 500 companies don't exist, because they've either been acquired or they've either gone bust. So what the speakers did, and this was another panel discussion, is they said that there's three kind of ways you can classify businesses. They're either a prayer, a stayer, or a player. What does that mean? So if you're a prayer as a company, you know that AI is coming and it's going to take X, Y, Z roles. What are you going to do? If you sit there praying, like, I want this to go away, you're a prayer, and you're likely to be one of those Fortune 500 companies that just doesn't exist anymore, because you have just kept going with the same old. And, doing the same thing again is not going to produce different outcomes, and you're not going with the change, and there's disruption there. So praying, that's what they were talking about, being a prayer. Being a stayer is you accept that there's disruption and you acknowledge it, but you make that active decision not to do anything about it. So the difference between, I guess, a prayer and a stayer is a prayer is in denial, a stayer accepts it, but decides they want to stay the way they are and not act. And those are the kind of companies that probably would end up being acquired, because they are not going to have the revenues, they're not going to serve their clients in the best way, and probably somebody will see that as an opportunity to take them, but merge them into their own, and they're likely to be a player. A player is somebody who notices the disruptions and they act on it and they find ways to change it. So a really interesting thing is in the property sphere, we have globalization, which means a lot of property investors are global. So we in the UK and London, we have investors that are coming from Asia, for example, or the Middle East. So they are buying offices in the West End, but they are, for example, living in Dubai. Globalization means that they can do that with relative ease. Now, by using technology that we have been able in the property industry to create a platform where you can buy that office without even having to come to London, even though it's a physical bricks and mortar property. Because with virtual reality technology, they can wear their headset and they can move from investment option to another investment option to another investment option. And BNP Paribas in particular, I read, has now live brokers in the virtual reality headset, because JLL had launched NXT offices technology where you use the virtual reality to see the offices. And BNP have done it in a way that you see the broker on the other side of your headset. So there is really no need for you to travel to see that property. And say you've seen the property and you go, oh, I wonder if that one wonder what door height the first one had, for example, was a question like that comes up. Well, you can easily go back. There's no need to revisit, reorganize an inspection. It's just breaking down all those barriers. So that would be being a player, going with the times. And one of the interesting facts is if you look at the disruptions for you as a labor force, as an employee, and what you can offer to your employers, is what one of the panelists was saying is disrupt yourself, and that will help you to find the opportunities within the business and career context that accept these disruption and find where, because when I was applying for jobs at one point in my life, somebody said to me, there is an advantage to working with a dysfunctional team, and that is that it presents opportunities because you could come in and potentially offer some kind of fixing or some kind of solution. So it's a similar concept. So you look at where the disruptions are and you're finding those opportunities. The final talk of the day was, they called it the $1 trillion question. What investment to invest in? So they had various industry investment leaders, and they talked about 3 assets. So we had a core office in Singapore CBD. We had a PRS scheme in West London, and we had a Seattle office complex in the kind of fringe of Seattle, but it's mixed use offices underneath and let to Amazon. And they said, you are a core fund. Here are 3 options, and they had 3 speakers present them as they would do to an investment committee, and then look at the investment committee's decisions in what they would go for. So some of the key risks that they're looking at would be rental growth, would be looking at market risks, what is the security of income like, yield, what is the cap rate, so looking at various different factors. And one of the key things with investment committee decisions is always, well, what was the objectives of making this investment in the first place? So this is a core fund. So what does that mean? What are they trying to get out? And then you will find what is the right asset. An interesting fact is they said that if you look at a global political risk like Brexit, there's many others in the world. Some people count Trump as one, most people count Trump as one, but there's many different ones. And they said that actually institutional investors are continuing to invest in the UK. And why is that? That is because they are they don't view political risk the way that non-institutional investors are viewing. They take a longer term risk, and they're looking past Brexit, and they're seeing the opportunities, and they're looking at the fundamentals of demand and supply, the longer term solutions. Whereas they said that non-institutional investors, those are the ones that are affected by, that are affected by global political risks like Brexit. And that could also be a reason why, because there's more non-institutional investors, from my understanding, in the residential market than the commercial. And so that's probably why the residential market is seemingly hit harder by Brexit than the commercial market. This is what the final discussion was about, so that was really interesting too. To end the day, there was a discussion on rising stars, as it was, so because I was nominated as a young person property to attend. So it was just looking at how you can make sure you're ahead of the game in property. And this means basically going back to the fourth discussion, be aware of the disruptors, be aware of technology, and find those ways to add value and opportunities to bring and go with the times. So I thought that was really interesting. I found the day actually really engaging. I thought the speakers were fantastic. The co-founder of Tesla being my favorite, because I think that kind of set the scene of the day. That was like a thought of the day. It was talking about cars, but actually very much relates to real estate. And I hope to present to you tomorrow, part 2 of the conference, shortly. Thank you for watching.